More than 400 million years ago, while the land remained barren and uncertain, certain life forms had already settled into designs that would endure beyond empires of bone. A world where survival did not depend on dominance, but on endurance. They were here before the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for about 165 million years, and then vanished in a geological instant. Yet some animals alive today trace their ancestry back more than 400 million years. They were already swimming when the first forests formed on land, before insects filled the skies, before the Atlantic Ocean existed, before the Himalayas rose, before mammals, before birds. Entire chapters of life unfolded after they had already begun. They survived 5 mass extinctions. They endured the Permian extinction, when about 90% of marine life disappeared. They lived through asteroid impacts, ice ages that covered continents beneath miles of ice, volcanic winters, supervolcano eruptions, and massive shifts in oxygen levels. Ecosystems rose and collapsed around them, and still, their body designs remain strikingly familiar, almost identical to fossils hundreds of millions of years old. Scientists sometimes call them living fossils, though the term is debated. A species is not the same as a lineage, and a lineage is not the same as a body plan. Evidence reveals that evolution does not always demand visible transformation. Some forms become highly stable, especially in deep marine environments where conditions change more slowly than on land. The lobe-finned coelacanth, rediscovered in 1938 after being known only from fossils, still moves its fins like primitive limbs. The horseshoe crab, which appeared around 450 million years ago, still carries blue blood used in modern medicine. The chambered nautilus still regulates buoyancy with a shell geometry that predates land animals and survived the extinction that erased the ammonites. But how does a body plan survive 500 million years? What makes some species fragile while others endure across geological ages? How did giant reptiles disappear while these ancient swimmers remained? And are they thriving or simply enduring in silence? Tonight, we trace the lineages that were never meant to last this long. But before we begin, let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. It's always comforting to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now take a slow breath. Let your shoulders loosen, and together let us sink toward creatures whose lineage began before the first tree ever touched the sky. Long before names were given to ages of stone and flame, time was already arranging its quiet layers, placing beginnings far behind the point where dinosaurs would someday appear. When people speak of creatures older than dinosaurs, they are not describing a single lifetime stretching across eons, but something more patient and more enduring, a continuity that flows through generations the way a current passes through water without ever being the same water twice. Dinosaurs entered the world around 230 million years ago, a late chapter in a story that had already been unfolding for immense spans. By then, oceans had long been inhabited by forms whose ancestry reached backward through unfathomable intervals. To understand such antiquity requires a gentle separation of ideas that often drift together in everyday speech. A species is a single twig on the branching tree of life, delicate and temporary. A lineage is the branch itself, persisting even as individual twigs grow, fade, and are replaced. A body plan is the deeper architecture of that branch, the underlying design that can remain recognizable long after countless species have come and gone. Through this lens, age is not counted by how long one organism survives, but by how long a structural idea continues to function. Evolution is often imagined as a restless sculptor, endlessly reshaping every surface, yet in many corners of the sea, it behaves more like a careful conservator, preserving forms that already suit their surroundings. Change still occurs within them, in genes, in chemistry, in rhythms too small to notice, though outwardly they may appear steady, as if time has chosen to move softly around them. The ocean itself helps sustain this quiet persistence. It existed long before hills carried green, long before winds crossed empty stone. Water cradled life while land remained austere stone. Even now, the deepest regions shift with extraordinary slowness. Temperatures hover within narrow margins. Sunlight never intrudes. Seasons barely touch those depths. In such places, survival favors balance rather than reinvention. A form well suited to that stillness may continue with little alteration, its design proven not by novelty, but by duration. This enduring suitability is sometimes called evolutionary resilience, a phrase that suggests strength without noise. It does not imply resistance to all change, only an ability to remain viable while worlds transform above. Shorelines migrate, climates tilt, continents wander, yet far below, certain anatomies persist like old melodies carried through new instruments. Their success lies in efficiency, in harmony with pressure, darkness, and sparse nourishment. Nothing is hurried there, and so nothing demands haste in response. To say that a living creature is older than dinosaurs is therefore to speak of inheritance rather than age, of continuity rather than immortality. It is an acknowledgement that some biological blueprints were established so early and fit their settings so precisely that vast chapters of planetary history have passed without requiring them to be redrawn. Such lineages are not relics held over from a finished world. They are ongoing expressions of an ancient design, still participating, still moving, still quietly present within the same enduring sea. Within that vast continuity, time becomes less a force of erasure and more a wide reservoir where successful forms are allowed to drift onward. The measure of their antiquity is written not in years alone, but in persistence of pattern, a signature repeated across epochs. To witness such beings is to glimpse duration made visible, a reminder that life does not always race toward new shapes, and that survival can rest in simply remaining, unchanged still. Ancient patterns continue without asking permission ever. On a winter morning in 1938, a museum curator stood beside a dockside crate, expecting the ordinary contents of a fisherman's catch. Inside lay a body the color of midnight steel, its scales thick as enamel, its form carrying the hush of something misplaced in time. The animal did not resemble novelty, it resembled memory. For more than 66 million years, creatures of its kind had existed only as impressions in stone. Their shapes rested in museum drawers and limestone slabs, labeled, dated, and quietly concluded. Paleontologists regarded them as a finished chapter, a lineage that had closed before the most recent layers of earth had settled. Yet here, one rested in full weight and texture, not mineral, but flesh, lifted from waters off South Africa, as if it had simply taken a wrong turn through history. Its fins drew the longest silence. Instead of delicate rays like those of most fish, each fin extended on a sturdy stalk, jointed within, wrapped in muscle. When later specimens were observed alive, these fins moved in a slow, alternating rhythm, resembling the measured placement of limbs rather than the flutter of fins. The motion suggested an ancient experiment in anatomy, a design echoing the early architecture from which terrestrial vertebrates would one day arise. In this living body, that architecture had never fully faded. The fish itself seemed unhurried in every aspect. Its metabolism flowed at a subdued pace, conserving energy in the dim environments it favored. It spent much of its life within deep volcanic caverns along steep underwater slopes, places where light rarely wandered and temperatures shifted only slightly across seasons. In such sheltered chambers, it drifted with minimal effort, its physiology tuned to patience rather than pursuit. Even its hunting followed this quiet principle, waiting rather than chasing, letting opportunity arrive instead of seeking it. When scientists began to study its tissues and later its genetic code, further layers of antiquity revealed themselves. Molecular comparisons showed that its lineage had diverged from that of other fishes hundreds of millions of years ago, near the early branching of vertebrate history. The distance was so great that its nearest living relatives were not typical fishes at all, but lungfishes and the distant ancestry of four-limbed animals. The coelacanth occupied a solitary position on the diagram of life, like a surviving note from a very old composition, still faintly resonating. News of its existence traveled through laboratories and lecture halls with a kind of reverent disbelief. The astonishment did not arise from spectacle or size, but from continuity made visible. A form once known only through mineral outlines had appeared again in living motion, carrying within its cells a record written long before familiar landscapes had taken shape. Researchers handled each new specimen with careful attention, aware they were observing not merely a rare fish, but a survivor from an interval so distant that its beginnings preceded entire chapters of animal evolution. In quiet aquariums where a few individuals have been studied, it glides with the same deliberate cadence, fins lifting and settling as though stepping across an unseen floor. Nothing in its manner suggests urgency or intrusion. It moves as if it belongs equally to the present moment and to ages far beyond sight, a living continuity whose presence softens the boundary between what was and what remains. Along certain quiet shorelines, when the tide withdraws and the sand gleams with a thin skin of water, small armored figures emerge from the margin between sea and land. They move slowly, as if guided by a memory older than the coast itself, their domed shells reflecting faint light like polished stone shaped by patient hands. These are horseshoe crabs, bearers of a design that had already taken form around 450 million years ago, long before the first forests lifted their leaves into the air. In those distant ages, the continents were bare expanses of mineral and wind. No roots held soil in place, no branches traced shadows across the ground. Yet in the shallows, these creatures advanced across sea floors that would one day harden into rock and rise into cliffs. Their bodies followed a blueprint so balanced that it required little alteration as eras unfolded. The broad shield at the front protected delicate structures beneath, while a tapering spine trailed behind like a steady rudder. Beneath that shell, rows of jointed limbs worked in quiet coordination, guiding food toward the mouth while also carrying the animal forward in an unhurried crawl. The substance flowing through their vessels carries an unusual hue, a soft blue drawn from copper-based molecules that bind oxygen. This fluid has become valuable to human medicine since it reacts instantly to certain bacterial toxins, forming gentle clots that reveal contamination. Laboratories now depend on this ancient chemistry, drawn from a lineage whose circulation system was perfected long before mammals appeared. The same blood that once moved through primordial seas now assists in safeguarding modern treatments, linking distant chapters of life through a shared molecular language. Each year, guided by cycles older than written calendars, they gather along beaches to reproduce. Under moonlit tides, they press into the sand, females depositing clusters of small green eggs while males cling close behind. The pattern has persisted across immense spans of time, its timing aligned with lunar rhythms and coastal currents. Shorebirds arrive to feed on the exposed eggs, drawing nourishment from a ritual that began before birds themselves existed in recognizable form. In this way, the horseshoe crab participates in a chain of relationships that extends outward through ecosystems, its constancy supporting travelers of the sky as faithfully as it supports its own descendants. 5 mass extinctions have swept across the planet since their lineage began, each one rearranging life with sweeping force. Entire dynasties vanished, reefs collapsed, climates lurched from warmth to chill and back again. Through all of this, the horseshoe crab endured. Its success rests not in speed or aggression, but in the quiet authority of protection. The shell functions as a living shield, deflecting pressure and teeth alike, while the body beneath remains compact and efficient. Little energy is wasted, little must be replaced. Seen from above, it resembles a fragment of ancient armor set gently in motion, a relic that never became a relic because it never needed to change. The tides continue their patient rise and fall, and with them, these enduring forms return, tracing the same deliberate paths across the sand as they have for ages beyond counting. Their presence, a calm affirmation that some designs, once shaped, can accompany the world for a very long while, far from coasts and sunlight, where coral walls descend into dim water, a pale spiral drifts with unhurried grace. The nautilus moves by quiet pulses, releasing gentle jets that nudge it forward, its many slender tentacles trailing like fine threads. It does not hurry, because its design was shaped in an age when haste offered little advantage, and that design has endured for nearly 500 million years. Long before animals walked upon continents, before soil carried roots or air carried wings, ancestors of this creature already traveled ancient seas. Their form belonged to a lineage of cephalopods, whose soft bodies were sheltered within coiled shells, each curve widening in careful proportion. While other branches of that lineage later abandoned external shells or reshaped them into new expressions, the nautilus retained the original architecture, a living echo of early marine invention. Inside its shell lies a sequence of chambers arranged in a widening spiral. The animal itself occupies only the newest chamber, while the older ones remain sealed behind it. Within those empty spaces, gases and fluids are adjusted through a slender living tube called a siphuncle, allowing the creature to rise or sink without strain. The process is gradual, almost contemplative, as though the animal negotiates gently with gravity and water until balance is restored. In this way, it travels the vertical distances of its habitat without sudden motion, conserving energy in a realm where efficiency rewards patience. Growth comes slowly. A nautilus may take many years to reach maturity, adding chambers one by one as its body enlarges. Each addition is permanent, a precise extension of the same mathematical curve, so that the shell becomes a visible record of time. Individuals can live for decades, their steady metabolism matched to surroundings that seldom change quickly. Such longevity is rare among cephalopods, most of which live brief and vivid lives, yet the nautilus follows a quieter schedule, its rhythms aligned with stability rather than speed. It drifts along the slopes of deep reefs, where light fades into blue shadow and currents move with measured restraint. These environments remain comparatively constant across centuries, sheltered from the abrupt fluctuations that visit shallower waters. Within this calm, the nautilus encounters little pressure to revise its form. Its shell provides defense, its buoyancy system provides control, and its sensing organs guide it through darkness with delicate sensitivity. The design answers every requirement posed by its world. Long ago, relatives known as ammonites flourished in astonishing variety, their shells ornamented with ribs and coils that filled ancient oceans. They vanished during a global catastrophe that erased many marine lineages, yet the simpler geometry of the nautilus persisted. Its smooth spiral, unadorned and balanced, proved sufficient for survival when extravagance failed. Through that distant upheaval it continued, carrying forward a pattern first drawn in primordial seas. Today, the nautilus still traces that same curve through the water, its shell turning slowly as it moves, each chamber a silent testament to continuity. Nothing in its form suggests urgency or excess. It exists as a quiet equation solved long ago, still correct after ages beyond counting, still drifting through the dim architecture of reefs as though time were a gentle current and it had learned, from the beginning, exactly how to follow it. In its presence, duration itself seems to breathe slowly, keeping pace with the turning spiral that has never forgotten its origin. Seen in profile, the frilled shark appears less like a hunter of the present than a remnant shaped in an earlier draft of life. Its body stretches in a long, tapering line, supple as woven rope, with fins set far back so that most of its length moves in gentle undulation. The outline recalls forms known from distant strata, silhouettes that once drifted through seas, very different from those above them now. Though living individuals seldom meet human sight, their lineage extends through tens of millions of years, a duration carried quietly within muscle and bone. The head bears an expression unlike that of most sharks, the mouth placed at the front rather than beneath, and around it lie soft fringed folds that give the species its name. These frilled gill slits ripple faintly as water passes, six paired openings tracing delicate arcs along the throat. Inside the jaws, slender teeth rise in ranks, each one narrow and sharply pointed, arranged like pale grass bending in a current. When the mouth closes, those teeth interlock, forming a cage from which little escapes. It spends most of its life far below the bright layers of the ocean, inhabiting slopes and canyons where pressure is immense and disturbances are few. In such depth, movement tends toward economy, and bodies that function well remain, much as they are across long intervals. The frilled shark follows this quiet principle, drifting with slow flexes of its elongated frame, conserving strength, waiting for small fishes or squid to pass within reach. Encounters near the surface are rare, and when they occur, they often happen by accident, an individual drawn upward by currents or caught within fishing lines. Observers who glimpse it there sometimes remark upon its composure, as though it has carried the stillness of its usual realm along with it. Yet it is not a visitor from another time, only a resident of a habitat that changes so slowly that alteration offers little reward. Studies of its anatomy suggest that many of its traits have remained consistent across vast spans, not because evolution has paused, but because its surroundings have asked so little adjustment. Isolation can act as a kind of shelter, limiting competition and softening the pressures that elsewhere drive rapid transformation. In that sheltered obscurity, a successful design may continue with only subtle refinements, its outline preserved while minute internal variations accumulate through generations. So the frilled shark endures, its sinuous body writing slow curves through water that has known its kind for ages beyond memory. It does not display the haste of more recent predators, nor the ornament of reef dwellers, carrying instead a plain and ancient elegance. Within the immense archive of living forms, it persists like a line of script never erased, continuing its quiet passage through the depths while epochs turn far above. No spectacle announces its presence, no color signals its arrival, yet it remains perfectly suited to the dim province it inhabits, a form balanced with its conditions, as precisely as a key within a lock. Time moves around it, reshaping coastlines and climates, but in its secluded domain the ancient pattern holds, steady and sufficient, continuing its measured swim through the long continuity of the sea. Such persistence is not stagnation but accord, a life tuned so well to its surroundings that survival becomes a quiet routine repeated across millennia. In that enduring rhythm, the creature remains as it has long been, a gentle inhabitant of shadowed waters, unchanged in outline, continuing. In quiet river currents that slide past stones and roots, a slender body drifts with deliberate grace, neither eel nor snake, but something more ancient in design. The lamprey carries no jaws, no hinged bite, only a round mouth shaped like a small disc, ringed with pale keratin teeth that glimmer softly when it turns. This form has endured for over 360 million years, a span so vast that continents have traded places many times while its basic structure remained. Long before familiar fishes filled streams and seas, creatures built on this same plan were already moving through primordial waters, guided by senses tuned to current and chemical trace. Its skeleton is not bone but cartilage, firm yet flexible, lending the body a quiet resilience. Along its back runs a simple rod called a notochord, a structure shared with the earliest vertebrates, holding the form in alignment without the segmented columns that later animals would evolve. Muscles ripple along its length in smooth waves, producing motion that seems almost effortless, as if the animal were being carried forward by the flow itself. Inside, its organs follow an arrangement preserved from remote ancestry, an internal pattern that has required little revision because it continues to answer every demand placed upon it. The mouth, though gentle in outline, serves with remarkable efficiency. When feeding, it fastens to a surface and uses a soft, rasping tongue to draw nourishment, a method neither hurried nor wasteful. Some species live as parasites for a time, others never feed at all once maturity arrives, relying instead on energy stored earlier in life. Such varied habits arise from the same underlying design, like different melodies played on an instrument unchanged since antiquity. Fossils uncovered from ancient sediments show lampreys so similar to those living now that the differences require careful measurement to detect, their lineage written in a script of enduring simplicity. Simplicity, in this sense, does not mean crudeness. It reflects a balance refined until nothing extra remains. Without heavy jaws or dense bone, the body demands little fuel, and with few rigid parts, it resists damage from shifting gravel or persistent currents. Reproduction follows ancient rhythms as well, adults ascending waterways to lay eggs in shallow nests before their brief lives conclude. The young that emerge resemble drifting threads, transparent and small, filtering nourishment from their surroundings until time guides them toward transformation. Each stage unfolds with quiet certainty, repeating sequences established when vertebrate life was still new to the world. So the lamprey continues, a living outline from the earliest chapter of backboned creatures, its presence linking present waters to ages almost beyond imagination. It does not display ornament or excess, only the steady expression of a plan that has proven sufficient across uncounted generations. While more elaborate anatomies have appeared and vanished, this modest form persists, carried forward by the same principles that shaped it long ago. The rivers it inhabits alter their courses, climates shift, and surrounding life transforms, yet the lamprey remains close to its original pattern, as though time has flowed around it rather than through it. It moves within the present while bearing the contours of antiquity, a small persistent testament that the earliest solutions fashioned by evolution can remain not only viable but complete, needing no embellishment. Only continuation. Pressure writes its own kind of stillness. Far below the restless surfaces known to weather and season, the weight of water settles into a steady embrace that rarely shifts, rarely loosens, rarely surprises. In that immense depth, the surroundings remain so consistent that time seems to move with softened steps, and life shaped there often keeps the form it first found useful. Temperature holds nearly constant, neither warming with quiet summers nor cooling with passing winters. Without such cycles, bodies need not adjust to sudden change, and structures that function well continue without revision. The absence of sunlight removes another force of disruption. Near the surface, light governs growth, bloom, and decline, driving chains of feeding and competition that rise and collapse with each passing interval. In the deep, illumination never arrives, so these surges never begin. Food drifts downward slowly, from distant layers, a gentle rain of organic remnants that sustains communities without provoking frenzy. Creatures dwelling in such realms tend toward measured living. Their metabolisms proceed at unhurried rates, conserving energy as though each motion were weighed before it is made. Muscles contract with care, hearts beat with deliberate spacing, and lifespans often extend far beyond those of relatives in brighter zones. When existence unfolds at this pace, there is little advantage in rapid transformation. A body suited to its surroundings can remain much the same across spans that would reshape species elsewhere. Predation, too, softens in these depths. Hunters exist, yet encounters occur less frequently, and the need for constant defense diminishes. Without relentless pursuit, elaborate armor or swift escape becomes less essential, allowing simpler anatomies to persist. Competition follows a similar pattern. Resources are limited, though they arrive with reliable regularity, and populations remain sparse. In such conditions, survival favors efficiency over innovation. Organisms that use little and waste nothing find steady success, passing their traits forward with only subtle alteration. Geological disturbances seldom intrude. Storms cannot churn these waters, and winds never reach them. Even when upheavals transform continents or climates above, the deeper layers often continue with minimal disturbance, insulated by sheer volume and depth. This stability forms a kind of refuge, not a place of stagnation, but a domain where continuity is possible. Within it, ancient biological designs may endure, simply because nothing insists they change. Over immense durations, this quiet persistence becomes visible in the forms of the inhabitants. Some resemble impressions preserved in stone strata, their outlines echoing shapes recorded long ago. They are not unchanged in every detail, for life always shifts in small internal ways, yet their overall structure remains recognizable, as though the original blueprint still answers every requirement. Evolution here behaves less like a sculptor carving new figures and more like a caretaker maintaining a well-balanced mechanism. In such a realm, survival is guided by harmony with surroundings that rarely vary. Stability itself becomes a selective force, favoring those who match its calm constancy. And so, the deep sea, vast and patient, serves as a quiet archive where living bodies carry forward designs, first tested in distant ages, preserved not by resistance to time, but by a partnership with an environment that changes so slowly it almost seems to breathe in centuries. Silence did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly across the world, as though the planet itself were exhaling a long and weary breath. In the span of geological time, the change was swift. Yet within that swiftness, events unfolded in a sequence as patient as falling ash. This was the great dying at the end of the Permian, when nearly 90% of marine life faded from the waters. Vast volcanic provinces opened across what is now Siberia, pouring molten rock over the land for thousands of years. The eruptions did not merely shape the surface. They released immense volumes of carbon dioxide and sulfur gases, veiling the atmosphere and altering the chemistry of air and sea alike. Sunlight dimmed behind drifting aerosols, seasons faltered, and warmth accumulated in the oceans until familiar boundaries dissolved. As carbon dioxide dissolved into seawater, it formed weak acids, shifting the balance on which shells and skeletons depended. Creatures that built their bodies from calcium carbonate found the surrounding water slowly eroding what they produced. Reefs that had stood for ages weakened, their intricate frameworks loosening grain by grain. Currents carried the fragments outward, scattering the remains of once thriving communities across the seafloor. At the same time, warming reduced the ability of seawater to hold oxygen. Circulation slowed, stratified layers forming like unmixed oils, and in those layers, breath grew scarce. Many organisms relied on steady oxygen flow to fuel their cells, yet now that supply thinned. In places, it vanished entirely, leaving broad regions where only microbes adapted to deprivation could persist. These microbes released methane as they flourished, and that methane rose through water and air, strengthening the planetary heat and deepening the crisis. Food webs unraveled quietly. Predators lost prey. Grazers lost pastures. Drifting larvae failed to find the conditions they required. Extinction did not come as a single strike, but as a long diminishing, species after species slipping away until the oceans held only a fraction of their former variety. The losses were so extensive that later ages would inherit seas almost empty by comparison, their ecological tapestries reduced to sparse threads. Yet, even within that immense decline, certain inhabitants endured. In deeper realms, far below the zones most affected by temperature swings and chemical shifts, conditions altered more gently. Waters there remained cool, and though oxygen lessened, it did so gradually enough for tolerant organisms to adjust. Many of these survivors possessed slow metabolisms and modest energy needs, traits that allowed them to withstand scarcity without collapse. Some lived near sediments, where microbial activity already kept oxygen low, so the broader depletion resembled circumstances they had long known. Others fed on detritus rather than living prey, making them less dependent on complex food chains. Their forms were simple, their demands slight, and these qualities became quiet advantages as the crisis unfolded. While elaborate ecosystems faltered, such understated lives continued almost unnoticed within their shadowed refuges. When volcanic fires finally waned and atmospheric balance slowly returned, the oceans began the long work of renewal. The survivors, though few, carried ancient lineages forward, providing the foundations from which later diversity would arise. Their persistence did not reverse the devastation, yet it ensured that life itself retained a foothold, a small but steady presence waiting within the waters until the planet, patient as ever, settled once more into calmer rhythms. From such quiet endurance, the future slowly gathered as surviving forms multiplied, diversified, and spread, until emptiness softened and the living mantle of the sea was gently rewoven over ages beyond counting. In silence beneath, returning light above, slowly. A brightness crossed the ancient sky, with the quiet inevitability of gravity fulfilling its work. The object had traveled for ages through cold darkness, unhurried, unerring, until Earth turned into its path. When it arrived, it struck the region now called Chicxulub, releasing energy beyond any storm or eruption the planet had known. Rock vaporized, crust rebounded, and a plume of molten debris rose outward in a widening crown. The impact forced oceans aside in towering walls that raced across basins, their motion carrying sediments, organisms, and minerals into sudden suspension. Shorelines vanished beneath surging water, then reappeared beneath falling waves. Around the globe, fragments of ejected stone arced through the atmosphere and descended again, heating the air as they fell. Forests ignited far from the site of collision, not from flame touching branch, but from the warmth of returning debris passing through the sky. For a time, the horizon glowed with scattered embers, each one a remnant of the impact's distant violence. Dust and aerosols spread through the upper atmosphere, forming a veil that softened daylight. Photosynthesis slowed as sunlight struggled to reach the surface. Plants faltered, and with them, the creatures that relied upon their steady growth. On land, the great reptiles that had long dominated found their food sources dwindling, their immense bodies demanding more sustenance than the dimmed world could provide. Gradually, their numbers thinned, not through a single instant of destruction, but through a lingering scarcity that offered little renewal. In the oceans, a similar quiet unraveling took hold. Microscopic plankton that formed the base of marine food webs declined as light diminished. With fewer of these drifting producers, small grazers diminished, and the loss rippled upward through each successive level. Predators accustomed to abundant prey encountered widening gaps where life had once flourished. The sea did not empty at once, yet its intricate chains loosened, link by link, until only fragments remained intact. Amid these shifts, certain inhabitants possessed traits that favored endurance. Creatures of small size required less nourishment, their tissues sustained by modest energy intake. Those adapted to darker or deeper waters depended less on sunlight-driven cycles, drawing sustenance from sources not immediately disrupted by the dimmed skies. In such forms, efficiency functioned as a quiet safeguard. Their bodies operated like carefully tended lamps, using little fuel and wasting little heat, allowing them to persist while more demanding organisms declined. Some species could enter states of reduced activity when resources grew scarce, slowing their metabolism until conditions improved. Others fed on detritus, the fine organic remnants drifting through water, a supply that continued even when primary production waned. These understated strategies did not grant dominance or spectacle, yet they granted continuity. As the years passed and the atmosphere gradually cleared, these survivors remained present, ready to expand into spaces left open by absence. The event that ended the age of dinosaurs thus reshaped life not only through force, but through contrast between need and restraint. Vast bodies with high demands yielded to smaller forms that lived within narrower means. In the aftermath, the planet entered a quieter interval of recovery, its ecosystems rebuilding from the foundations that had endured. The seas, though altered, still held their patient inhabitants, and through their steady existence the long story of life continued, turning gently onward as Earth resumed its slow and ancient rhythm. There are ages when the planet leans slightly in its journey around the sun, and that small celestial adjustment reshapes the surface of oceans and continents alike. Over spans measured in tens of thousands of years, orbital rhythms alter the distribution of sunlight, guiding Earth into long intervals of cold, known as glacial cycles. Ice does not rush outward in these times. It gathers patiently, snow layering upon snow, until its own weight compacts it into vast crystalline sheets that spread across high latitudes and mountain ranges. As these frozen expanses enlarge, they draw water from the seas to feed their growth. Shorelines shift gradually outward as sea level falls, exposing continental shelves that had rested beneath waves for ages. Valleys once filled with tides become corridors of bare sediment, and islands join mainlands through newly revealed land bridges. Coastlines do not vanish but relocate, tracing new outlines that living communities must follow if they are to remain within familiar conditions. In marine realms, This withdrawal of water reshapes habitats with quiet insistence. Shallow regions narrow, lagoons contract, and reefs find themselves closer to the surface than before. Species, accustomed to certain depths, adjust by moving with the retreating edge, descending along continental slopes, or traveling toward equatorial waters, where temperatures remain more stable. These migrations unfold across generations, guided not by sudden instinct, but by gradual selection, each offspring thriving best, where conditions most closely resemble those of its ancestors. Cold itself carries a steady influence. Lower temperatures slow chemical reactions, reducing metabolic demands and allowing some organisms to endure longer intervals with limited food. Others adopt seasonal dormancy, resting through the harshest periods as if time itself had softened. The oceans circulate differently as well, currents shifting paths in response to altered temperature gradients. Nutrients redistribute, creating new pockets of abundance while leaving former ones sparse. Through these subtle rearrangements, life finds pathways that maintain continuity even as surroundings transform. Ice ages do not remain forever. Orbital patterns change again. Sunlight strengthens, and the great sheets begin to recede. Meltwater returns to the seas, raising levels and restoring submerged landscapes. Creatures that once traveled outward may drift back toward expanding coastlines, retracing routes carved during colder ages. Each advance and retreat becomes part of a repeating cycle, a slow breathing of the planet that alternately reveals and conceals the margins of land and water. Within this rhythm, resilience develops not through resistance but through flexibility. Species capable of shifting range, adjusting depth, or altering timing persist across these oscillations, while those bound too tightly to a single condition may fade. Over many cycles, lineages that remain tend to share certain traits: moderate energy use, tolerance for temperature variation, and life strategies that allow movement when circumstances require. These qualities form a quiet inheritance, refined not in moments of crisis but across long sequences of gradual change. So the record of ice ages is written not only in layers of sediment and striations of stone, but in the living patterns of organisms that endured them. Each glacial advance once pressed the world into new shapes, and each thaw released it again. Yet through all these transformations, life continued its measured passage. The migrations, adjustments, and returns became threads woven into the broader tapestry of Earth's history, a testament to persistence, guided by patience and by the steady turning of the planet through its ancient celestial dance. At intervals scattered across deep history, the chemistry of the oceans shifted so profoundly that breath itself became scarce. These intervals are known as ocean anoxic events, spans when dissolved oxygen declined across wide marine regions, altering the balance that most animals depend upon. They unfolded not as sudden catastrophes but as slow transformations, guided by volcanic outpourings, warming climates, and changes in circulation that prevented surface waters from mixing freely with the depths. When the upper layers warmed, they grew lighter and resisted sinking, forming stable strata that sealed lower waters away from contact with the air. Without renewal from above, oxygen already present below was gradually consumed by respiration and decay. Organic particles drifting downward fed microbes that multiplied steadily, and in using that nourishment, they drew still more oxygen from the surroundings. Over long stretches, the deeper zones became depleted, then nearly empty of it, leaving conditions that only certain forms of life could tolerate. Many organisms rely on oxygen to release energy within their cells, a process as fundamental as the turning of a wheel. When that supply dwindles, tissues falter. Yet not all creatures share the same requirements. Some possess physiologies suited to scarcity, their enzymes tuned to function with minimal oxygen, their cells capable of sustaining metabolism at levels that would challenge others. In anoxic intervals, these specialists persisted, while more demanding species receded, their quiet endurance allowing lineages to bridge periods that reshaped marine communities. Sediments from such times record these transitions with delicate clarity. Layers rich in dark organic material mark intervals when decomposition slowed in oxygen, poor waters, preserving what would normally vanish. Fossils found within these strata often belong to species known for tolerance of low oxygen, evidence that the environment selected for particular traits rather than halting life altogether. The pattern resembles a gentle filtering where only certain forms pass through while others remain behind. Even today, regions known as oxygen minimum zones drift through parts of the modern ocean. These are not relics, but living examples of the same conditions, though usually less extreme. In these layers, concentrations of oxygen fall so low that many fishes avoid them, yet specialized organisms continue their routines. Some crustaceans adjust their blood pigments to bind oxygen more efficiently, while certain worms and microbes rely on alternative chemical pathways that do not require it at all. Their presence shows that the strategies shaped long ago remain effective whenever similar environments arise. The persistence of these adaptations illustrates how traits forged in distant eras can retain value across ages. A body plan or metabolism that once allowed survival during ancient depletion can still confer advantage when oxygen thins, whether through natural cycles or shifting climates. Such continuity does not imply stasis, for each generation carries subtle variation, yet the underlying capacity endures like a well-practiced skill. Thus, the story of dwindling oxygen is not solely one of loss. It is also a record of endurance, written in physiology and behavior, a reminder that life explores many solutions to the same challenge. When seas grew faint of breath, certain inhabitants met the change with quiet competence, continuing their existence within conditions that might seem inhospitable elsewhere. Their survival carried forward a legacy of resilience, linking present waters to those remote intervals when the oceans, for a time, nearly forgot how to breathe. Size shapes destiny in ways so subtle that it can pass unnoticed, like a quiet rule written beneath the surface of life. In the long chronicle of living forms, bodies of modest scale often move through time with a steadiness that larger creatures rarely achieve. Their advantage does not lie in strength or spectacle, but in the gentle arithmetic of energy, growth, and renewal that governs every heartbeat and cell. A small body requires less fuel to remain alive. Each motion draws only a modest portion from its reserves. Each day asks for only a modest supply. When conditions grow difficult and food becomes scarce, such restraint becomes a form of protection. Metabolism can slow, activity can lessen, and the organism may continue on little more than what the environment provides. In contrast, large animals must sustain vast tissues and complex systems, their needs rising in proportion to their size. Should resources diminish, the margin for survival narrows quickly, leaving little time for adjustment. Reproduction follows a similar pattern. Many small creatures mature swiftly and produce numerous offspring, scattering new generations into the world before circumstances can change. This rapid cycle allows populations to recover from loss and to adapt through variation, each generation carrying slight differences that may suit shifting conditions. Larger beings tend to grow slowly and bear fewer young, investing great effort into each one. Such care offers stability, when surroundings remain favorable, yet it limits the pace at which adaptation can occur if the world alters its terms. Flexibility of habitat often accompanies smallness as well. Compact bodies can shelter in crevices, burrow into sediments, or drift with currents into new territories. They occupy niches too narrow or transient for larger animals to use, finding sustenance in overlooked places. When environments shift, they may relocate with relative ease, following suitable conditions across distances that would challenge heavier forms. Their lives unfold close to the margins, where subtle opportunities appear and vanish, and this closeness fosters resilience. Long ago, immense reptiles strode across continents, their weight pressing into the ground with each step. They ruled their era with grandeur, their forms towering above the landscapes they inhabited. Yet, such magnitude carried hidden costs. To sustain such size required steady abundance, and when that abundance faltered, their scale became a burden rather than a strength. Smaller organisms, less dependent on plentiful supply, continued quietly where giants could not. The contrast was not a contest of power, but a difference of balance, one shaped by proportion rather than might. Through successive ages, this principle has repeated itself in countless variations. Whenever climates shift or habitats transform, creatures of limited size often find ways to persist, adjusting their rhythms, dispersing their young, or entering dormant states until stability returns. Their modest demands allow them to pass through intervals that challenge more imposing beings. They do not dominate their surroundings, yet they remain, and in remaining, they carry their lineages forward. The persistence of small bodies reveals a gentle truth about survival. Success in the long story of life does not always favor the largest or the strongest. Sometimes it favors the unobtrusive, the economical, the adaptable. Within such forms, evolution has found enduring partners, vessels capable of traveling through deep time without drawing attention to themselves. In their quiet continuity lies a kind of strength measured not in size, but in duration, a steady presence that endures as ages turn and the living world reshapes itself again and again. Time moves differently for creatures whose lives unfold at an unhurried pace. Their days do not rush forward with urgency, nor do their years vanish in swift succession. Instead, existence stretches gently, each moment spaced with quiet intervals, as though life itself were breathing slowly within them. Among many enduring lineages, this measured rhythm has proven to be a subtle advantage, shaping bodies and behaviors that favor patience over haste. A long lifespan allows experience to accumulate within a single organism rather than passing quickly from one generation to the next. With extended years comes prolonged opportunity to reproduce, ensuring that even if seasons of hardship intervene, chances remain for offspring to appear when conditions improve. Such longevity also reduces reliance on rapid population turnover. Where short-lived species must constantly replace themselves, these slower beings persist. As individuals, steady presences within their environments, their growth reflects the same philosophy. Many reach maturity only after considerable time has passed, their development unfolding in gradual stages. Though this delay may seem disadvantageous in a world that often rewards speed, it grants the body an opportunity to allocate resources carefully, building tissues with efficiency rather than haste. Structures formed in this manner tend to be durable and well suited to stable surroundings, supporting survival across years that might outlast more hurried lives. Underlying this tempo is a metabolism that consumes energy sparingly. Cells operate at modest rates, converting nourishment into motion and maintenance without excess expenditure. When food becomes limited, such restraint proves invaluable. The organism can continue functioning on minimal intake, its internal processes adjusting like a flame, lowered but never extinguished. In habitats where resources arrive unpredictably, this ability to endure lean intervals without strain becomes a quiet form of resilience. Energy conserved in daily life also allows investment in survival rather than constant activity. Instead of pursuing frequent movement or rapid growth, these creatures devote their reserves to sustaining vital systems, repairing tissues, and maintaining balance within their bodies. The result is an existence marked by steadiness. They do not burn brightly and briefly, but glow with a consistent light that persists through changing circumstances. Reproduction follows a similarly deliberate course. Rather than producing vast numbers of offspring in quick succession, many slow-living species generate fewer young, often providing them with greater initial resources. This approach reduces waste and increases the likelihood that each descendant will survive. Though populations expand gradually, they also decline gradually, avoiding the dramatic fluctuations that can place a lineage at risk. Across long spans of Earth's history, environments have shifted in cycles of abundance and scarcity, warmth and chill, calm and disturbance. In such a world, speed can be advantageous for brief intervals, yet steadiness often prevails across ages. Creatures adapted to slow living carry within their physiology a harmony with time itself, their internal clocks aligned with extended durations rather than fleeting moments. The advantage, then, is not dramatic or easily noticed. It lies in continuity, in the ability to remain when faster lives have already run their course. Through restrained metabolism, delayed maturity, and long years, these organisms embody a strategy as old as life's earliest experiments. They endure not by racing against change, but by allowing change to pass around them, their quiet persistence forming a living bridge between distant past and unfolding present. Protection can take the shape of silence made solid. In many ancient lineages, survival has rested not in swiftness or concealment, but in the quiet assurance of a body encased. Armor, whether grown as an external skeleton or secreted as a shell, forms a boundary between living tissue and the shifting uncertainties of the world. This boundary does more than shield. It shapes how an organism moves, feeds, and endures across spans of time that outlast changing climates and vanished competitors. Hard exoskeletons arise through the careful deposition of minerals, often calcium compounds layered with organic matrices that grant both strength and slight flexibility. Such coverings distribute force across their surfaces, reducing the chance that pressure or impact will damage what lies beneath. A predator's bite may meet resistance instead of yielding flesh, and currents that might buffet softer bodies instead pass along curved surfaces designed to absorb strain. The protection is constant, requiring no sudden reaction, no burst of energy, only the steady presence of structure. Shell geometry adds another layer of quiet engineering. Curves, spirals, and ridges are not mere ornament. They redirect stress, channeling it along lines that prevent cracks from spreading. A rounded form disperses pressure evenly, while a tapered coil strengthens itself with each turn. Over immense intervals, natural selection has refined these shapes into configurations that balance material with efficiency, using minimal substance to achieve maximal resilience. The result is a dwelling carried everywhere, a portable architecture that remains effective long after its blueprint first appeared. Choosing defense over speed influences the entire rhythm of life. Creatures protected by armor often move deliberately, their bodies built for steadiness rather than pursuit. They rely on endurance and concealment within their coverings rather than flight. This strategy reduces the need for rapid metabolism or constant vigilance, allowing energy to be directed toward maintenance and growth instead of escape. While swift animals may outrun danger, the armored simply withstand it, their stillness serving as a quiet reply to threat. Such designs tend to persist across geological eras because they answer a wide range of challenges without requiring alteration. Environmental conditions may shift, predators may change, yet a strong protective barrier remains useful under nearly any circumstance. This versatility grants stability to the lineages that bear it. Their forms do not need frequent revision, since the fundamental principle of shielding delicate tissues from harm remains valid regardless of surrounding change. Over time, this constancy becomes visible in the fossil record, where similar silhouettes appear in layers separated by millions of years. Protection also influences development. Many armored organisms grow by adding material incrementally, expanding their coverings as their bodies enlarge. This gradual construction produces layered records of age, each addition marking a period of life preserved in mineral form. The shell or exoskeleton becomes both defense and chronicle, holding within its structure a history of seasons endured and conditions survived. Across the living world, these protective architectures illustrate a principle as old as life's earliest experiments. Survival does not always favor those that move fastest or strike first. Sometimes it favors those that endure, whose bodies are shaped like fortresses scaled to living size. In their patient solidity lies a strategy that has carried countless lineages through upheaval and calm alike, allowing them to remain while other forms appear, flourish, and fade. Their armor does not make them invincible, yet it grants them a steadiness that time itself seems to respect, preserving their presence as ages unfold around them. Across the living world, continuity often depends on a quiet arithmetic carried within the act of reproduction. Not all species invest in a single heir or a sheltered brood. Many ancient lineages instead release their future in great numbers, letting chance and current decide which among them will continue the line. This strategy does not rely on certainty, it relies on abundance. Large clusters of eggs appear in waters and sediments, each one small, translucent, and seemingly fragile. Yet their strength lies in multitude. Where only a few might survive, thousands may be produced, ensuring that even if most are lost to hunger, shifting conditions, or wandering predators, a portion will endure. The parent does not guard them or guide them. Survival is entrusted to probability itself, a quiet partnership with the unpredictability of the environment. External fertilization accompanies this method in many aquatic species. Eggs and reproductive cells are released into surrounding water, mingling freely in currents that carry them outward. Fertilization occurs beyond the body, a process shaped not by closeness, but by timing and number. When countless cells meet within the moving medium, union becomes likely despite the vastness around them. The water serves as both meeting place and pathway, dispersing the next generation far beyond the reach of the parent's own range. From these beginnings emerge larvae so small they drift rather than swim, suspended in gentle suspension like living dust. Their forms often differ greatly from the adults they will become, adapted for travel rather than permanence. Carried by circulating flows, they spread across distances no mature individual could cross alone. Some settle quickly when they encounter suitable ground, while others continue wandering until they find conditions that match their needs. This dispersal allows a single reproductive event to seed many locations at once, distributing risk across space instead of concentrating it in one place. Such wide distribution fosters resilience within populations. If one region becomes unfavorable, others may remain hospitable, sustaining descendants that can later repopulate altered areas. The lineage, therefore, persists not as a single cluster, but as a scattered constellation, each point capable of renewing the whole. Genetic variation also increases through this mixing, since individuals from distant origins may eventually meet and contribute their differences to future generations. Diversity becomes a quiet reservoir of possibility, ready to support adaptation when circumstances shift. This method demands little energy from the parent once the reproductive moment has passed. Instead of prolonged care, effort is devoted to producing numerous offspring, each equipped with the minimal provisions needed to begin life. The approach may appear uncertain, yet across immense spans it has proven remarkably effective. Many organisms that follow it have endured through climatic oscillations, geological transformations, and ecological rearrangements. Their persistence rooted in the simple principle of spreading opportunity widely. In this way, reproduction becomes more than continuation. It becomes a strategy of endurance, distributing life so broadly that loss in one place is balanced by survival in another. The waters that carry these early forms act as partners in the process, extending the reach of each generation beyond what any solitary body could achieve. Through abundance, dispersal, and patient probability, lineages maintain their presence across ages, their existence renewed again and again by countless beginnings set gently adrift into the world. Within every living cell lies a script written in molecular symbols, a text so small it cannot be seen, yet so enduring it can persist across epochs. This script, formed of DNA, carries instructions copied from generation to generation with remarkable fidelity. In certain ancient lineages, portions of this code remain strikingly consistent over immense spans, preserved not by stillness, but by careful continuity within the processes that replicate life. Genes that perform essential functions tend to change very slowly. These conserved sequences guide fundamental tasks such as cellular repair, metabolism, and development, because even slight alterations can disrupt these delicate operations. Natural selection favors versions that remain stable. Over millions of years, such genes pass through countless descendants with only minimal modification, their patterns sustained like lines of a poem, recited flawlessly across ages. The constancy does not imply that evolution has paused. Rather, it reveals that some instructions are already so well suited to their roles that alteration offers little advantage. Mutation, the source of genetic variation, still occurs, yet its pace can differ among organisms. Species with long lifespans, measured growth, or efficient DNA repair mechanisms often accumulate changes more gradually than those with rapid cycles of reproduction. Each replication of genetic material carries a small chance of error, and when replications happen less frequently, new variations appear more slowly. Over geological durations, this measured tempo can result in lineages whose outward forms resemble ancient ancestors, their genetic foundation shifting only subtly while preserving familiar structure. Modern techniques have allowed scientists to examine these patterns with increasing clarity. By comparing sequences among living species and their distant relatives, researchers can trace relationships that stretch far beyond visible resemblance. Molecular clocks estimate divergence times by counting differences in DNA, revealing how long two lineages have followed separate paths. In some enduring groups, these comparisons show surprisingly small gaps, suggesting that their genetic frameworks have remained stable across spans that witnessed the rise and fall of many other forms. Yet, stability at the genetic level does not mean absence of change. Evolution can unfold quietly within regulatory regions, the portions of DNA that influence when and how genes are expressed. Small adjustments there may alter timing, coloration, or behavior without transforming the overall body plan. Such modifications accumulate like fine brushstrokes layered upon an old painting, refining details while leaving the central composition intact. To an observer across deep time, the creature appears unchanged, though within its cells, a subtle history of adaptation has been written. This hidden evolution offers a reminder that transformation does not always announce itself in visible ways. A lineage may maintain its ancestral silhouette while its internal chemistry adjusts to shifting conditions, enzymes fine-tuned, proteins modified, regulatory switches recalibrated. These microscopic revisions allow continuity without dramatic reinvention, ensuring that the organism remains compatible with its surroundings, even as environments alter gradually. Across millions of years, genetic stability can therefore act as a quiet anchor. It preserves successful designs while permitting gentle variation, balancing constancy with flexibility. In this balance lies a form of endurance that is neither rigid nor restless. The living code continues its patient transmission, letter by letter, generation by generation, carrying forward instructions first composed in remote antiquity. Through that ongoing inheritance, ancient lineages remain present today, their visible forms familiar, their unseen molecules whispering of time, measured not in lifetimes, but in the vast, unbroken continuity of life itself. There are stretches of biological history when change softens to a whisper, when generations pass and outward forms remain nearly the same, as though time itself has chosen restraint. In such intervals, evolution does not halt, yet its pace eases, guided by a principle known as stabilizing selection. This process favors individuals whose traits remain close to an established balance, preserving characteristics that already suit their surroundings with quiet precision. Within any population, variation exists, small differences in size, shape, color, or physiology. When conditions remain steady across long spans, those individuals whose traits deviate too far from the average often fare less well. Extremes may struggle to feed efficiently, avoid danger, or reproduce successfully. The middle range, by contrast, continues to thrive. Over many generations, this gentle filtering narrows variation and maintains the form best aligned with the environment. Evolution continues, yet it refines rather than transforms. Such stability often arises when a design fits its ecological role with remarkable accuracy. An organism whose structure matches its habitat, diet, and behavior may encounter little pressure to alter its fundamental pattern. Its body performs each required task without strain, its internal systems cooperate smoothly, and its interactions with surrounding life remain balanced. In this state, dramatic innovation offers no clear advantage. Subtle adjustments still occur, though they tend to preserve the established arrangement rather than replace it. This does not imply that the world itself stands still. Landscapes shift, climates fluctuate, and communities of living beings rearrange. Yet if these changes unfold gradually, a well-adapted organism can track them through minor modifications instead of sweeping redesign. The underlying blueprint remains intact, while small refinements accumulate, allowing continuity without upheaval. The result is a lineage that appears consistent across immense intervals, its silhouette familiar even as unseen details evolve. The phrase often used to describe this principle is simple, almost conversational in tone. If it works, keep it. Though informal, it captures a profound truth about natural processes. Evolution does not pursue novelty for its own sake. It favors what succeeds. When a form proves effective over long durations, selection tends to conserve it, passing it forward with careful fidelity. Innovation becomes most likely when conditions demand it, when established traits no longer provide sufficient advantage. In environments that change slowly or remain relatively uniform, the incentive for transformation diminishes. Organisms already well suited to such settings experience little pressure to diverge from their successful design. Stability itself becomes a selective force, encouraging constancy across generations. The passage of time then resembles a long, calm current, carrying familiar shapes onward without disturbance. Even during these tranquil phases, genetic variation continues at subtle levels, offering a reservoir of possibilities should circumstances shift. This hidden diversity ensures that if conditions eventually alter more rapidly, some individuals may possess traits suited to the new reality. Thus, apparent stillness conceals preparedness, a quiet readiness woven into the fabric of life. Through stabilizing selection, evolution demonstrates its capacity for patience. It can sculpt swiftly when required, yet it can also maintain a form for ages when that form harmonizes with its world. In such moments, persistence becomes its own achievement, and continuity stands as evidence that adaptation sometimes means remaining much as one already is, carried forward by a balance so well matched that change itself finds little reason to intrude. Stone itself moves, though it does so with such patience that the motion escapes ordinary notice. Beneath oceans and continents alike, vast plates of crust glide upon the softer mantle, drifting only centimeters each year, yet across millions of years, these quiet journeys reshape the face of the planet. Through this slow choreography, land masses gather into supercontinents and later part again, carrying shorelines, climates, and habitats along with them. When continents converge, their edges press together until seas withdraw and mountains rise where waters once lay. Marine basins narrow, currents redirect, and shallow regions may vanish beneath uplifted terrain. Life that once flourished along those margins must adjust, seeking new stretches of suitable conditions or following retreating waters toward other coasts. The process unfolds gradually, allowing generations to shift range step by step, their distribution altering as the geography beneath them transforms. Eventually, the great land assemblies begin to separate, stresses within the crust, open rifts that widen into young oceans, their floors spreading as molten rock ascends and cools. New shorelines appear where none existed before, and with them come fresh ecological opportunities. Currents circulate differently through these expanding basins, redistributing warmth and nutrients, shaping climates both near and distant. In these evolving settings, organisms capable of dispersal track the environments that suit them best, adjusting their presence as the world redraws its outlines. Coastlines rarely remain fixed. They advance or recede as plates shift position, altering the relationship between land and water. Regions once near the equator may drift toward cooler latitudes, while others migrate into warmer zones. Such movement influences temperature, salinity, and the availability of light, each factor guiding which species can thrive. Over long durations, Populations that follow favorable conditions may travel immense distances without any individual journey seeming remarkable. Migration becomes not a single voyage, but a gradual inheritance, each generation occupying ground slightly displaced from that of its ancestors. Marine organisms often respond to these changes by extending their ranges along continental margins or across open waters. Some ride currents that carry them towards suitable habitats, while others expand slowly as adjacent territories become hospitable. Those unable to shift may decline, yet lineages with flexible tolerances or effective dispersal methods persist, their presence mapping the evolving geography of the seas. In this way, the movement of continents and the distribution of life remain intertwined, each influencing the other through ages. Fossil records preserve traces of these journeys. Similar species appear in strata now separated by wide oceans, evidence that those lands were once joined or closer together. As continents parted, their resident organisms diverged along separate paths, adapting to local conditions while retaining hints of shared ancestry. The shapes of shells, bones, or leaves thus become quiet testimony to ancient proximity, reminders that distance today does not always reflect distance in the past. Through all these shifts, the planet never stands still. Its surface rearranges itself with deliberate calm, opening and closing corridors, altering coastlines, and guiding currents along new routes. Life responds with equal patience, adjusting distribution rather than abandoning existence. The partnership between drifting continents and migrating species forms a slow dialogue written across geological time, a conversation conducted in stone and tide. In this long exchange, endurance belongs not to those rooted immovably in one place, but to those able to accompany the changing map. As the crust continues its gradual motion, habitats will continue to wander, and living forms will continue to follow, their quiet persistence tracing the contours of a world forever in motion, yet always sustaining the delicate continuity of life. Far below the reach of storms and tides, a force presses steadily from every direction, invisible yet immense. Water, drawn by gravity toward the planet's center, exerts pressure that increases with depth, layer upon layer, until the weight becomes constant and unyielding. In these depths, that pressure has remained nearly unchanged for millions of years, a silent condition as reliable as the turning of the planet itself. Unlike the shifting circumstances of shallower realms, where winds stir currents and temperatures rise or fall, the deep environment maintains a remarkable physical consistency. The density of water, the compression of space within tissues, the behavior of dissolved gases, all remain governed by the same immense weight. Organisms that inhabit such regions grow accustomed to this steady force from the moment they form. Their cells, membranes, and internal fluids balance themselves against it, establishing a harmony between living matter and surrounding pressure that persists throughout their lives. At the surface, conditions fluctuate continually. Waves lift and collapse, sunlight warms and fades, and atmospheric changes ripple through the upper layers. These variations create environments in constant motion, encouraging rapid adjustment and frequent transformation among the creatures that dwell there. By contrast, the deep world experiences none of this restless variability. The pressure neither surges nor relaxes. It simply remains, a quiet constant that shapes existence without interruption. Bodies adapted to such constancy often exhibit structures finely tuned to withstand compression. Proteins fold in ways that resist distortion, cell membranes maintain stability despite the surrounding force, and biochemical reactions proceed at rates suited to this compressed setting. Over immense spans, These adaptations become integrated into the very architecture of the organism. When conditions remain the same, generation after generation, there is little incentive for radical alteration. Stability favors forms already in equilibrium with their environment. This unchanging pressure also influences how sound travels, how nutrients disperse, and how tissues maintain buoyancy. Each physical property of the habitat follows predictable patterns, allowing life to evolve within reliable boundaries. In such surroundings, dramatic redesign offers no clear advantage. Subtle refinements may occur, yet the fundamental plan remains effective, preserved through the quiet approval of natural selection. Forms that function well under constant compression continue with little modification, their persistence reflecting a partnership with the conditions that surround them. The contrast between surface and depth thus extends beyond light or temperature. It lies in the very mechanics of existence. Above, forces fluctuate and demand flexibility. Below, they hold steady and reward continuity. Through this difference, the deep environment acts as a keeper of ancient designs, allowing lineages to endure with outlines that echo distant ages. Their survival is not accidental. It arises from a match between organism and setting so precise that change becomes unnecessary. Across geological time, continents have shifted and climates have transformed, yet the pressure in those depths has altered scarcely at all. It remains as it was when many early marine forms first adapted to it, a persistent physical reality that does not hurry or waver. Within its embrace, life proceeds according to rhythms set long ago, sustained by the same force that shaped its earliest ancestors. Thus pressure, though unseen, stands among the most enduring influences on living form. It does not carve landscapes or stir oceans, yet it governs the conditions under which countless organisms exist. In its constancy lies a quiet explanation for the persistence of certain bodies across ages, their designs preserved not through resistance to change, but through perfect accord with a world that has never asked them to be otherwise. From far above, fragments begin their descent, so small they would escape notice if seen at all. They fall not as flakes of ice, but as particles of life's remains, tiny pieces of organic matter released from distant waters and carried downward through the column of the sea. This gentle rain is known as marine snow, a constant settling of material that links surface productivity with the quiet ecosystems below. Each particle may be a fragment of a microscopic organism, a grain of waste, or a sliver of tissue, once part of a drifting body. As these bits sink, they gather others, forming soft clusters that resemble pale dust motes drifting through darkness. The journey can take days or weeks, and during that time, microbes attach themselves, beginning the slow work of decomposition. Nutrients locked within the fragments are gradually released, enriching the water they pass through and leaving a faint trail of sustenance behind. By the time these particles reach the deep, they have changed in composition and texture, transformed by countless minute processes. Organisms that inhabit these depths depend upon this steady arrival. Rather than hunting swift prey or grazing abundant growth, they wait for nourishment to descend. Some extend delicate appendages to capture passing flakes, while others gather what settles upon the seafloor, consuming it with deliberate motions. In such a setting, feeding resembles gathering rather than chasing, a practice suited to a realm where resources arrive sparingly. The cycles that govern this exchange unfold with remarkable slowness. Material that sinks may take years to be fully broken down and returned to circulation. Microbial communities play a central role, dismantling complex compounds into simpler forms that other organisms can use. This recycling maintains a balance, ensuring that nothing is wasted and that nutrients remain available despite the scarcity of fresh supply. Energy moves through this system at a measured pace, transferred from one participant to another without haste. Because the input of nourishment is limited, inhabitants of these environments have evolved ways to use it with exceptional efficiency. Their bodies require little fuel, their movements remain restrained, and their growth proceeds gradually. Each particle of organic matter becomes valuable, supporting life that has learned to thrive on modest provisions. This frugality extends across entire food webs, shaping communities where survival depends on patience rather than abundance. Over immense spans, such quiet exchanges have sustained lineages that might struggle in more crowded or competitive surroundings. The constancy of falling material provides a dependable, though sparse, source of sustenance, allowing organisms to persist without dramatic fluctuations in population. Stability arises from limitation, as the slow trickle of resources discourages excess and favors balance. The descent of marine snow thus forms an unseen connection between distant layers of the ocean, a subtle pathway along which energy travels from one realm to another. Though each particle is small, together they create a continuous stream that nourishes life in places far removed from the origins of that nourishment. The process does not rush, does not surge, and does not falter. It continues with the same gentle persistence across centuries and millennia. Within this falling drift lies a lesson written in motion so soft it nearly escapes attention. Life can endure on little, provided that little arrives faithfully. Through patient recycling and careful use, entire communities flourish in seeming scarcity, their existence sustained by fragments that descend from above, settling quietly through the water like a slow and endless whisper. Names sometimes linger even when they no longer tell the full story. Among the creatures that resemble ancient ancestors, one phrase has often followed them through textbooks and conversations: living fossil. The words suggest stillness, as though certain beings stepped out of remote ages and simply remained unchanged while the world moved on. Yet the reality beneath that label is more intricate, more fluid, and more faithful to the quiet motion that guides all life. No species ever stands entirely still in evolutionary time. Each generation carries slight variations within its cells, differences in proteins, regulatory signals, or metabolic pathways. These alterations may be minute, invisible to the eye, yet they accumulate gradually, like fine grains settling upon a surface. Even when an organism's outward appearance resembles that of distant ancestors, its internal workings continue to adjust in response to environment, diet, symbiotic partners, and countless other influences. Change persists, though it may pass unnoticed without careful examination. The impression of permanence often arises because certain body plans prove remarkably effective across long durations. When a structure already suits its surroundings, natural selection tends to preserve it, allowing only small refinements. Over time, this can produce lineages whose silhouettes remain familiar across geological intervals. Observers encountering such forms may assume that evolution has paused, when in truth, it has simply shifted its focus from visible transformation to subtler modifications within tissues and genes. Modern biological study has revealed these hidden layers with increasing clarity. Detailed comparisons of DNA sequences show that even species considered ancient in appearance possess unique genetic signatures, shaped by countless generations since their ancestors first arose. Molecular pathways may differ, enzyme efficiencies may vary, and developmental timing may shift, all without altering the overall outline of the organism. These quiet adjustments allow populations to remain compatible with changing conditions while maintaining forms that continue to function well. The phrase, living fossil, therefore reflects more about human perception than about the organisms it describes. Vision tends to favor dramatic contrast, and when change unfolds slowly or internally, it can escape notice. Yet evolution does not measure its work by how striking it appears. It operates continuously, guided by survival and reproduction rather than spectacle. In some lineages, it paints bold new patterns, while in others, it refines existing designs with delicate precision. Consider how a familiar melody may be played on different instruments. The tune remains recognizable, yet its tone and resonance shift with each performance. In a similar way, a species can retain a recognizable form while its molecular composition, behavior, and physiology evolve over time. The continuity of shape becomes a kind of refrain, repeated across ages, while the underlying details change softly beneath it. Understanding this quiet transformation deepens appreciation for those organisms whose forms echo distant epochs. They are not relics frozen in history, nor are they remnants spared from change. They are participants in the same ongoing process that shapes all living things. Their persistence made possible by adaptations subtle enough to escape casual view. Within them, evolution continues its patient work, adjusting, refining, and renewing without announcing itself. Thus, the idea of a creature untouched by time dissolves into a gentler truth. Life never stops evolving. It simply chooses, at times, to do so without visible drama, allowing continuity and change to exist together, woven so closely that only careful attention reveals where one ends and the other begins. In the 20th century, a single, unexpected specimen altered the way scientists understood the boundaries between past and present. In 1938, a fish long believed absent from the living world appeared among an ordinary catch, its form matching fossils once thought to represent a vanished lineage. That moment did not merely add a species to a catalog. It revealed that the oceans still held inhabitants unknown to modern eyes, survivors of histories written long before human observation began. The rediscovery stirred quiet curiosity rather than spectacle. If one ancient lineage could persist unseen, others might also continue in hidden regions. Attention turned toward the vast portions of the sea that remained unexplored, especially those beyond the reach of conventional vessels. Early expeditions had sampled only the uppermost layers, leaving most of the marine realm unvisited. Beneath those familiar surfaces lay immense spaces where conditions differed so greatly that direct observation required new tools and patient ingenuity. Engineers and researchers began developing submersibles capable of descending into these depths, vessels designed to withstand pressure and darkness while carrying observers within protective spheres. As these craft sank slowly through the water column, lights revealed landscapes never before witnessed. Slopes, ridges, and plains extended outward in muted tones, inhabited by organisms adapted to circumstances far removed from those near shore. Each descent resembled a careful unveiling, a gradual introduction to communities that had existed quietly beyond human awareness. With every expedition, new species appeared, some delicate, some resilient, all shaped by environments that had seldom been disturbed. Cameras recorded forms whose anatomies hinted at unfamiliar evolutionary paths, while sampling instruments collected specimens for closer study. Many discoveries showed that life in these remote regions followed principles distinct from those known in shallower habitats, demonstrating once more that the living world contained far more variety than previously imagined. Exploration did not stop at moderate depths. Specialized vehicles descended into trenches where the seafloor reaches its greatest distances from sunlight. There, instruments measured conditions and retrieved samples, confirming that even in such extreme settings, organisms persisted. The existence of life in these remote trenches illustrated that biological possibility extends into places once assumed uninhabitable, expanding the known limits within which organisms can function. Despite these advances, the portion of the ocean thoroughly examined remains small. Vast stretches have never been mapped in detail, and many regions have never been visited at all. The scale of the sea ensures that discovery proceeds slowly, each mission revealing only a fraction of what lies below. Scientists estimate that a large percentage of marine species have yet to be described, their forms and habits still awaiting recognition. This realization reshapes the understanding of what is known and what remains hidden. The modern age, often associated with comprehensive knowledge, still stands at the threshold of the ocean's deeper realms. Instruments grow more precise, vehicles more capable, yet the unknown continues to exceed the explored. Each descent into unexplored waters becomes not merely a journey of distance, but a passage into possibility. Thus, the rediscovery of a single fish decades ago serves as a quiet emblem of a broader truth. The seas retain mysteries not because they resist study, but because their vastness exceeds any single effort to observe them fully. Within that immensity, ancient lineages and unfamiliar species continue their lives, unnoticed yet enduring, awaiting the rare moment when curiosity and technology combine to bring them gently into view. Only recently, in Earth's long narrative, has a new influence entered the waters, one not shaped by geology or orbit or slow chemical drift, but by intention. Within a brief span of centuries, human activity has introduced forces unlike any that ancient marine lineages encountered during their earlier passages through time. These forces move quickly, altering conditions with a speed rarely seen in natural history, and their effects now reach even the most remote regions of the sea. Industrial fishing extends across vast distances, its nets and lines descending into habitats that once lay beyond regular disturbance. Mechanized vessels can harvest in hours what earlier methods might not have gathered in years. For species whose life cycles unfold slowly, such sudden removal can outpace their ability to replenish. Populations shaped by patience may find themselves reduced before new generations can mature, their ancient rhythms meeting a tempo they never needed to match before. Alongside this extraction, fragments of manufactured material drift through marine environments. Plastics, light enough to float yet durable enough to persist, travel with currents into open waters and settle in places far from their origin. Some break into particles small enough to be ingested by organisms that mistake them for food. Others entangle bodies or accumulate on the seafloor, forming deposits that do not readily decay. Unlike natural debris, these substances resist breakdown, remaining present long after their arrival, and introducing unfamiliar textures into ecosystems shaped by organic matter alone. Temperature, too, has begun to shift at a pace that challenges adaptation. As the atmosphere warms, heat transfers gradually into the ocean, altering currents, stratification, and chemical balances. Many marine species tolerate only narrow ranges of temperature, their physiology calibrated to conditions that once remained stable for ages. When warmth rises beyond those ranges, metabolism changes, reproduction may falter, and habitats can become unsuitable. Creatures adapted to slow variation now encounter change unfolding within a few generations. Carbon dioxide absorbed from the air dissolves into seawater, forming compounds that lower its pH. This process, known as acidification, affects organisms whose structures depend on calcium-based minerals. Shells and skeletons that once formed easily may require more energy to build, and in some cases may weaken or dissolve. The chemistry of the surrounding water thus shifts in ways that alter fundamental biological processes, introducing challenges that did not exist in earlier epochs. These influences differ from past upheavals, not only in their nature, but in their pace. Geological events often unfolded across long intervals, allowing populations time to adjust or migrate. The changes now occurring often proceed more rapidly, compressing transitions that once spanned millennia into decades. For lineages shaped by endurance rather than speed, such acceleration can strain the balance that sustained them for so long. Yet, even amid these pressures, responses begin to appear. Some species alter their ranges, moving toward regions that resemble former conditions. Others adjust timing of reproduction or feeding, subtle shifts that may help them persist. Scientists observing these patterns note both vulnerability and resilience, recognizing that life continues to explore possibilities even under unfamiliar circumstances. The presence of these new forces does not erase the long history carried within ancient organisms, but it does mark a turning point. For the first time, influences arising from a single species now ripple through environments that once changed only under planetary rhythms. The waters still hold their quiet inhabitants, and those inhabitants continue their measured lives. Yet the setting around them is entering a chapter unlike any before, written not by tectonics or orbit, but by hands that have only just begun to understand the depth of what they touch. Change has always visited the Earth, yet rarely has it arrived with such haste. Across earlier ages, shifts in climate unfolded over spans so long that countless generations could pass while conditions gradually transformed. In that extended time, populations adjusted their ranges, altered their timing, or slowly acquired traits suited to new circumstances. Today, however, warming progresses at a pace that compresses what once required millennia into mere decades. And this altered tempo reshapes the challenges faced by ancient marine lineages. Temperature influences nearly every aspect of biological function. It governs metabolic rate, the solubility of gases, the timing of reproduction, and the distribution of nutrients. When warmth increases slowly, organisms can track favorable conditions by shifting location or adjusting internal processes through gradual selection. Rapid warming leaves far less opportunity. Habitats may change faster than species can relocate, and physiological limits reached too quickly may reduce survival before adaptation has time to unfold. For creatures whose life cycles proceed deliberately, this acceleration presents a particular difficulty. Many enduring species mature only after long intervals and produce relatively few offspring during their lifetimes. Such strategies have long supported persistence, allowing individuals to invest energy carefully and maintain stable populations in consistent environments. Yet the same traits that once favored endurance can become vulnerabilities when surroundings alter swiftly. If numbers decline, recovery may take many years, and if conditions shift again before recovery occurs, the margin for survival narrows further. The contrast between past and present rates of change becomes especially significant here. Ancient climatic transitions, though sometimes dramatic in outcome, often advanced through gradual stages that allowed ecosystems to reorganize step by step. Present warming trends, driven by rapidly increasing greenhouse gases, proceed far more quickly than most natural shifts recorded in geological archives. This difference in speed alters the balance between challenge and response, testing whether long-established adaptations remain sufficient. Some species respond by extending their ranges toward cooler waters, their distributions drifting as thermal boundaries move. Others adjust seasonal patterns, spawning earlier or later in the year to match new conditions. These responses show that resilience remains present, a quiet capacity to modify behavior or location when required. Yet such adjustments have limits. If environmental thresholds shift beyond what physiology can tolerate, or if suitable habitats lie too distant to reach, persistence becomes uncertain. Uncertainty itself now forms part of the landscape these organisms inhabit. Scientists, observing long-lived lineages, recognize both their remarkable endurance and the unprecedented nature of current changes. Data gathered from monitoring programs reveal trends that unfold within a human lifetime rather than across deep time, offering glimpses of how swiftly marine environments can transform. The outcomes remain difficult to predict, since each species possesses its own combination of tolerance, flexibility, and reproductive rhythm. Still, the presence of ancient survivors today demonstrates a history of resilience that has already carried them through episodes of upheaval beyond easy imagination. Their continued existence suggests capacities that may yet prove valuable, subtle physiological traits or behavioral tendencies that support survival under shifting conditions. Whether these capacities will suffice in the face of rapid warming remains unknown, yet they stand as reminders that life often contains resources not immediately visible. Thus, the future of these enduring forms unfolds as a quiet question written not in words, but in unfolding years. The waters continue to warm, currents continue to shift, and within them ancient lineages persist for now, moving through the present as they have moved through countless past ages, sustained by adaptations shaped long ago, yet now meeting a world whose pace of change has quickened beyond any they have previously known. Power once walked the land in towering forms, bodies vast enough to shake the ground with each measured step. For millions of years, these giants occupied nearly every terrestrial niche, their diversity and scale suggesting an unshakable command of their world. Their presence defined entire ecosystems, and their reign seemed as enduring as the continents themselves. Yet dominance, however impressive, does not guarantee permanence across the deeper currents of time. Elsewhere, far from such grandeur, other organisms lived without spectacle. They neither ruled landscapes nor towered above their surroundings. Their lives unfolded quietly, shaped not by conquest but by balance. They consumed only what they required, reproduced at rates suited to their conditions, and expended little energy beyond what survival demanded. These modest strategies rarely attract attention, yet they form a pattern that has proven remarkably durable through shifting eras. Dominant species often depend upon abundant resources to sustain their size and activity. Large bodies require ample nourishment, stable climates, and reliable food webs. When those supports remain intact, such creatures flourish, expanding their influence across wide territories. When those supports falter, their very scale can become a burden. High energy demands leave little margin for scarcity, and specialized diets or habitats can limit the ability to adjust. Grandeur, in this sense, ties survival to circumstance. Organisms built for efficiency follow a different path. Smaller forms, streamlined physiologies, and flexible habits allow them to persist even when conditions tighten. They can endure lean periods, inhabit marginal environments, and maintain populations with fewer resources. Over long spans, this frugality becomes a quiet advantage. It does not produce dramatic displays, yet it fosters resilience, allowing lineages to continue when more demanding forms decline. The contrast between dominance and endurance reflects two distinct evolutionary strategies. One emphasizes expansion and visible success, filling ecosystems with presence and activity. The other emphasizes conservation, maintaining equilibrium with surroundings and avoiding excess. Both can succeed for a time, yet only the latter consistently aligns with the unpredictable rhythms of planetary change. Environments alter, climates shift, and food sources vary, often in ways no organism can foresee. Under such uncertainty, efficiency offers stability where extravagance may falter. Fossil records reveal that many once prominent species vanished despite their former abundance. Their disappearance does not diminish their achievements, yet it illustrates that survival across vast durations depends on more than prominence. Meanwhile, numerous unobtrusive lineages continued, their forms scarcely altered, their existence steady and persistent. They did not dominate their worlds, yet they remained part of them, adapting quietly as circumstances evolved. This pattern suggests that natural selection often rewards balance rather than display. Traits that conserve energy, tolerate variation, and permit flexibility tend to support longevity across geological intervals. Spectacle may captivate observers, yet it plays little role in determining which forms endure. The processes guiding survival operate without regard for grandeur, favoring instead the qualities that sustain life under a wide range of conditions. In this light, endurance appears less like a contest and more like a partnership with the environment. Organisms that match their needs to what their surroundings can reliably provide create a harmony that can persist through immense spans. Their success lies not in overpowering their world, but in fitting within it, aligning physiology and behavior with the resources available. Thus, the history of life suggests a quiet principle written beneath the visible drama of extinction and emergence. Survival does not belong exclusively to the largest or most striking. It often belongs to those who live within their means, whose modest requirements and steady rhythms allow them to continue when circumstances shift. In that calm continuity, efficiency becomes its own form of strength, subtle yet enduring, carrying certain lineages forward long after louder presences have faded. Not all survival strategies announce themselves through motion or display. Some unfold so gently that they resemble stillness, as though life had chosen to rest rather than strive. Among many enduring marine lineages, existence follows this quieter pattern, one shaped not by urgency, but by restraint. Their movements are measured, their growth unhurried, and their needs modest, forming a way of living that favors continuity over prominence. Energy lies at the center of this approach. Every action, from swimming to feeding to reproduction, requires fuel drawn from the environment. Species that expend large amounts must constantly seek new supplies, tying their fate to the abundance of their surroundings. Those that use little can persist where resources remain scarce or unpredictable. By maintaining low metabolic demands, They reduce dependence on fluctuating conditions, allowing them to endure intervals that might challenge more active organisms. This economy of energy often accompanies a stable internal rhythm. Physiological processes proceed at steady rates, neither surging nor slowing dramatically, preserving balance within the body. Such constancy supports long lifespans and consistent function, traits that contribute to persistence across changing eras. Rather than racing through life, these organisms inhabit it gradually, their days unfolding with a calm regularity that mirrors the environments they occupy. Patience forms another element of this quiet strategy. Growth may take years, and reproduction may occur infrequently, yet each stage proceeds with reliability. Offspring emerge, prepared for conditions similar to those their parents experienced, inheriting traits already suited to their surroundings. Over generations, this deliberate tempo creates populations that remain stable even when circumstances vary slightly, their numbers rising or falling without sudden swings. Avoiding attention also plays a role. Species that dominate an ecosystem often attract predators, competitors, and shifting ecological pressures. Those that remain unobtrusive, occupying narrow niches or living in secluded habitats, encounter fewer disturbances. By existing outside the center of ecological activity, they reduce the likelihood of dramatic change imposed from outside forces. Their presence becomes part of the background fabric of the environment, steady and enduring. This understated way of life does not imply weakness. Instead, it reflects a different alignment with the world, one that values persistence above expansion. The absence of excess allows these organisms to maintain equilibrium with their surroundings, adjusting gently rather than resisting forcefully. When environmental conditions shift, their limited demands and flexible habits can provide room to accommodate new circumstances without requiring immediate transformation. Across immense spans, such qualities have supported lineages that continue with forms recognizable across distant ages. Their persistence arises not from domination or speed, but from harmony with the conditions that sustain them. While more conspicuous species may flourish briefly and fade, these quieter forms remain, their success measured not in spectacle, but in duration. Observing this pattern reveals a subtle principle woven through the history of life. Survival often belongs to those who align themselves with stability, who draw lightly upon resources, and who accept gradual change as part of existence. Their strategy does not seek attention, yet it endures beyond eras of upheaval. In still waters and shadowed depths, where movement is slow and competition muted, this approach continues to prove its worth. Thus, the quiet strategy persists, carried forward by organisms that ask little of their world and therefore receive enough. Their lives unfold without haste, guided by patience and balance, demonstrating that endurance can arise from simplicity. Through low energy, steady rhythms, and an unassuming presence, they remain part of the living tapestry, continuing softly while louder histories pass around them. Across the immense archive of Earth's history, written not in ink but in living forms, certain patterns appear again and again. They do not shout their message, yet they endure across ages, carried forward in bodies that continue where others ceased. These enduring lineages offer more than examples of survival. They reveal quiet principles about life itself, principles that become visible only when viewed across the long sweep of time. One of these principles is the strength of simplicity. Organisms with uncomplicated structures, efficient physiologies, and modest requirements often persist through conditions that challenge more elaborate forms. Their needs remain small enough to be met even when resources diminish, and their functions rely on processes that operate reliably under varied circumstances. Simplicity, in this sense, does not imply crudeness. It reflects a refinement shaped by countless generations, a distillation of what is necessary and what can be left aside. Through this lens, evolution appears less like a race toward complexity and more like a practice of continuity. Change occurs, certainly, yet its direction is guided by usefulness rather than ambition. Traits that support steady existence remain, while those that demand excess fade. Over immense durations, this steady filtering produces lineages whose persistence tells a story not of dramatic transformation, but of lasting suitability. Their forms become records of what has worked, preserved through the patient testing of time. Such persistence suggests that life possesses a kind of memory, not conscious or deliberate, but embedded within structure and function. Each organism carries within its design traces of ancestral solutions, adaptations refined long before any living observer could witness them. These inherited patterns form a biological archive, a record written in proteins and cells that continues to operate in the present. The past does not vanish. It remains active, expressed in every heartbeat, every movement, every quiet process sustaining life. This memory extends beyond individual species. Entire ecosystems hold echoes of earlier worlds, their interactions shaped by relationships established across distant ages. Predators and prey, symbionts and hosts, competitors and collaborators all participate in networks whose origins stretch far back. When one element persists, it preserves part of that network, maintaining connections that link present communities to those that existed long ago. Survival, then, becomes more than continuation of a single lineage. It becomes continuation of relationships woven through time. The enduring organisms encountered throughout this journey demonstrate that resilience often arises from balance. They do not resist change with force, nor do they chase novelty. Instead, they remain attuned to their surroundings, adjusting gradually as conditions shift. This harmony allows them to persist where more extreme strategies might falter. Their existence illustrates that adaptation can be quiet, expressed through steadiness rather than spectacle. Seen together, these patterns offer a perspective on life that extends beyond any one species or era. They suggest that the essence of evolution lies not only in innovation, but also in endurance, not only in transformation, but also in preservation. The living world unfolds as a continuum, each generation linked to those before it through threads of inheritance and adjustment. In this continuity, survival becomes a testament to compatibility between organism and environment, maintained across spans that dwarf individual lifetimes. Thus, the ancient survivors, still moving through modern seas, serve as gentle reminders of what life has always been capable of. Through simplicity, persistence, and memory carried within their forms, they embody the quiet strength that allows living systems to endure. Their presence affirms that across the long narrative of Earth, existence is sustained not merely by change, but by the enduring capacity to remain. At this very moment, far below familiar shores, life continues in regions no human eye has seen. Darkness there is not an absence but a setting, a vast interior where movement persists beyond observation. Within that unseen expanse, organisms shaped in remote ages glide, rest, feed, and breathe, carrying forward lineages that began long before the recent chapters of the world unfolded. The thought of them existing now, not in memory or stone but in living motion, changes the sense of time. They are not impressions left behind by vanished eras. They are present participants in the same hour that passes above the waves. While cities glow and winds move across continents, these beings continue their quiet routines, unaware of how distant their origins appear to those who study them. Much of their domain remains unexplored. Instruments have traced only small portions of the deep, and each descent reveals forms and behaviors no record had preserved. The vast majority of that realm still lies beyond direct witness, its inhabitants continuing their lives without interruption. In that obscurity, ancient branches of the tree of life extend onward, growing not upward toward light, but outward into space that has seldom known disturbance. Some drift slowly through open water, others rest upon slopes or sheltered hollows, and still others move along unseen currents that guide them from place to place. Their actions are unhurried, their patterns steady, their existence woven into surroundings that change so gradually that generations pass without disruption. They do not announce themselves, they simply continue. To imagine them is to recognize that history is not confined to the past. It breathes, circulates, and persists in living bodies. Every motion they make affirms continuity, a reminder that endurance can be active rather than preserved. They are not relics set aside from time. They are expressions of it, carrying within their tissues the ongoing story of survival. The deep habitats they occupy remain among the least known environments on the planet. Pressure, distance, and darkness have limited exploration, leaving wide regions visited only briefly or not at all. Yet, absence of observation does not imply absence of life. On the contrary, these secluded expanses sustain communities whose interactions unfold continuously, linked by subtle exchanges of energy and matter. In those places, ancient lineages still move through their surroundings just as their predecessors once did. Muscles contract, sensory organs register, faint signals, and internal systems maintain delicate balance. Each small action confirms a presence that belongs fully to the present world. Time has not set them aside, it has carried them forward. Seen in this way, the ocean becomes not a museum, but a living landscape, its depths inhabited by organisms whose ancestry reaches far back while their lives unfold now. The contrast between age and immediacy dissolves, replaced by a single continuous moment stretching across eras. Past and present meet within these creatures, joined without boundary. Somewhere in the dark ocean tonight, they continue, moving through their silent realm with the same calm persistence that has accompanied them across immeasurable spans. Their existence does not call for attention. It does not require witness. It simply goes on, steady and unbroken, a living continuation of ancient beginnings still in motion. Unseen by the surface world, their journeys persist in quiet precision, guided by instincts older than mountains and currents older than memory. They remain, not as echoes, but as living presences, keeping their ancient appointments with existence while night passes above and the planet turns calmly beneath the stars. Time flows around them without haste or demand. They endure within it still. Long before any familiar skyline existed, before valleys took their present shapes or shorelines traced their current curves, certain lineages had already begun their unbroken passage through time. They moved through waters that flowed across arrangements of land unlike those known today, and as continents shifted apart or pressed together, those organisms remained within the currents, adjusting quietly while the world altered its map around them. They persisted as mountains rose and wore away, as climates cooled and warmed, as oceans opened and narrowed. Through intervals of upheaval that reshaped the surface of the planet, they continued their steady routines. When disturbances spread across the globe and many forms disappeared, these survivors endured, not through force or dominance, but through alignment with the conditions that sustained them. Their bodies required little, Their rhythms matched their surroundings, and so they continued while others faded. They witnessed the passing of creatures that once seemed unassailable. Vast beings that filled entire landscapes eventually vanished, their absence leaving space where they had stood. The smaller swimmers and drifters remained, their modest lives unfolding beyond notice. They did not compete with giants, nor did they attempt to rival them. Instead, they followed a different path, one that favored balance over display and persistence over expansion. Adaptability shaped this path. Within their tissues lay the capacity for small adjustments, subtle shifts that allowed them to remain compatible with changing circumstances. Such flexibility did not transform them suddenly or dramatically. It worked slowly, refining processes that already functioned well, preserving forms that needed little alteration. Through these quiet modifications, they maintained continuity while the world moved through its long cycles. Efficiency also guided their endurance. Energy taken from their environment was used carefully, without excess. Movement remained deliberate, growth unhurried, reproduction measured. Nothing in their existence depended upon abundance. This restraint created a margin of safety, allowing them to withstand periods when resources grew scarce or conditions grew less favorable. By living within modest means, they secured the possibility of continuing. Across immense spans, this combination of adaptability and efficiency proved more lasting than size or spectacle. Grandeur can command attention for a time, yet attention does not ensure duration. Subtlety, by contrast, often escapes notice while sustaining itself through countless generations. The survivors carried forward in this manner, their presence steady even when entire ecosystems transformed. Their history now extends into the present moment, not as a relic, but as a continuation. They move through their habitats with the same calm persistence that accompanied their earliest ancestors. Each motion affirms that survival does not always belong to the strongest or the most visible. Sometimes it belongs to those who remain in quiet accord with their surroundings, adjusting gently while the larger world shifts. Seen from this perspective, their journey offers a kind of stillness within motion. Time passes, environments change, and yet they continue, neither hurried nor delayed, simply present. Their existence forms a thread that runs through the vast tapestry of Earth's story, linking distant ages with the current one through unbroken continuity. So they remain, still swimming, carried by currents that have flowed through uncounted years, their lives unfolding without spectacle. Nothing announces them, nothing needs to. Their persistence speaks softly, yet it carries across ages, a quiet testament to endurance that asks for no attention and requires no applause. Only the passage of time and the steady rhythm of existence, continuing as it always has, gentle and unending.